Hello, I'm Doreen Pietrantoni, and I'm an instructional technology specialist at Monroe #1 BOCES. I'm excited to bring to you today the impacts of computing, which is a concept area of the New York State Computer Science and Digital Fluency Standards. Today, we are going to understand the why of the standards, explore the impacts of computing concept area, and brainstorm unplugged and digital activities that meet the standards. First, we're going to talk about the background and the why the standards were created and why we need to integrate them into curriculum. Discussing the background of the standards, there were a group of stakeholders that came together, included classroom teachers, librarian, instructional specialists, agency educators, higher ed educators, NYS, and a consultant who had worked with other states to create these standards for learners. They worked together to create the different concept areas, reviewed the standards, and then presented the standards to the regions. Once the standards were preliminarily approved, primary experts were brought in to review the standards to make sure they were appropriate for primary age students. The standards are now fully approved, and there is the expectation of full implementation into all computer science courses the fall of 2023, and then full integration for K-12 all curricular areas by the fall of 2024. The vision of the computer science and digital fluency standards is every student will know how to live productively and safely in a technology-dominated world. This includes understanding the essential features of digital technologies, why and how they work, and how to communicate and create using those technologies. We are currently in the fourth industrial revolution. If you look here, the third industrial revolution was computing, and this graphic illustrates that was computers and smartphones and social media. We have shifted into the intelligence revolution because we're using technologies that I think many of us thought were more of the futuristic type of technologies, but we have the artificial intelligence, 3D printing, autonomous vehicles. I mean, I think some of us who might be a little bit older are thinking that's very Jetson-like, but it's part of our world now. And that is what has propelled us into the fourth industrial revolution. If you look at this graphic on the left, you will see that New York has almost 21,000 open computing jobs. That's 2.9 times the state average demand rate with an average salary of $105,000. However, only 48% of our public high schools teach a computer science class. So if we have that many open computing jobs that need the skills of computer science, and we're only having 48% of our high schools have those classes in it, there is a huge gap. Part of the reason of why we need these standards is because our students need to obtain these skills, not only to be college and career ready, but also to be successful in life. And as you look at the standards, you'll see they progress through K-12 in a way that makes sense, builds on skills, and deepens understandings of computer science and all of the other critical areas within the standards. Now, if you look at the right, we have hard skills and soft skills, and these are considered the most important by recruiters and hiring managers. So you have those analytical skills, high-level IT skills, basic computer knowledge. There's still people out in the workforce who are struggling with basic computer knowledge, and recruiters and hiring managers want people to know that those are very important in order to obtain a job. You need to have presentation skills, team management, project management, marketing, writing. I love that that is on this list because I think it's really important, especially as our students communicate a lot through text or emojis, that they need to understand that writing is a very important part of being college and career and life ready. And then the last one is graphic design. And then we look at the soft skills, we have teamwork, communication, time management, problem solving, creativity, leadership, organization, emotional intelligence, decision-making, and stress management. So we need to be able to help our students develop the hard skills as well as the soft skills, and these standards can help with that. So let's take a look at the standards, and I'm going to talk about how we read the standards. You'll see that we have grade bands, and they're listed right here. That will be the first part of the standard, and then the concept area, and then the standard number. There are 5 concept areas: impacts of computing, computational thinking, networks and systems design, cybersecurity, and digital literacy. Today, we are focusing on impacts of computing. To look deeper at how the standards are written, you have the grade band, and then you have the standard identifier that includes the grade band, the concept area, and the standard number. So for this example, it's grade band 4 through 6. CT is computational thinking, and standard number is 3. The standard language is right there. Visualize a simple data set in order to highlight relationships and persuade an audience. That is the actual standard. And then they have provided a clarifying statement that helps us further understand the standard language. So let's focus on the impacts of computing. Impacts of computing is the concept area, and there are some sub-concepts of this area, and I'll get to those in just a moment. Computing affects many aspects of the world at local, national, and global levels. Individuals and communities influence computing through their behaviors and cultural and social interactions. In turn, computing influences new cultural practices, informs citizens understand the ethical and social implications of the digital world, including equity and access to computing and computing technologies. The impacts of computing standards promote an understanding of the evolving impact of computing technologies on society through many lenses, including personal, social, cultural, accessibility, legal, economic, and ethical. And I think we can all agree that during school closures through the pandemic, that it is ever more apparent that there is an equity issue. Either there was an inequitable distribution of devices, or there was an equitable distribution of Wi-Fi throughout our state and states across the nation. So this is something that's really important to think about with impacts of computing. Now, there are 4 sub-concept areas of impacts of computing. They include society, ethics, accessibility, and career paths. And you'll see, I'll talk about the definitions of each of those, and you'll see how they play and support the impacts of computing. One thing to note is that each concept area has less than 15 standards. And the impacts of computing actually only has 7 standards. So when we think about that, it's not an overindulgence of standards. The state is not trying to make it difficult for you to integrate these standards into your learning. And they were very purposeful when creating the concept areas. When the standards were first being created, digital literacy and digital citizenship had quite a few standards included within that concept area. And then as they reviewed the standards, they looked at perhaps a better distribution of those standards to other concept areas. So when you think about ethics and accessibility, they may include some standards that you might primarily think belong in digital literacy or digital citizenship, but they are included in this area. And you'll also see that in the cybersecurity concept area. Some of those standards, one might at first glance think they should be digital citizenship. They've been pulled into the cybersecurity or the impacts of computing area. So they were very purposeful at where they put these sub-concept areas in the standards to make sure that there was an authentic alignment of those standards. First, I'm going to talk about sub-concept area society. Computing can change or reinforce cultural practices and equity within society. Human social structures that support education, work, and communities have been affected by the ease of communication facilitated by computing. Governments enact laws to influence the impact of computing technologies on society. Ethics sub-concept area. Computing is not done in a vacuum. The question of ethics in computing is for both creators and users of technology. If computer scientists and end users do not take into account biases and ethics of what has been built, algorithms and programs may have unintended impacts on society. Accessibility sub-concept area. Accessibility sub-concept area. The development and design of computing system needs to take into account the needs and wants of diverse end users and purposely consider potential perspectives of users with different backgrounds and ability levels, identifying potential personal bias during the design and implementation process maximizes accessibility in product design, and awareness of professionally accepted accessibility standards helps to evaluate computational artifacts for accessibility. Career path subconcept area. The increased connectivity between people in different cultures and in different career fields has impacted the variety and types of careers that are possible. There are also many possible career paths within computer science itself, as well as different specialties within each field that make computer science a broad and encompassing opportunity. We are going to take a moment to review the standards, and I'm going to show you a website that NYS has created that has a great amount of resources. You'll see this website, which I'll be providing the link with this video, has some different downloadables. This first one here has all the standards. It has the guiding principles in which the standards were created, the lenses which were taken when the standards were created, and some other supporting documentation that goes along with the standards. There's a glossary of terms. It's very important that we start using the correct vocabulary when we are talking about certain concept areas and applications throughout the standard process. This is a great thing to have up in your classroom. Make sure you're using things like algorithm and decomposition or things like that might help our learners as they build their fluency throughout these standards. There's also an Excel version of the standards if you prefer that to a PDF. As an educator, you can go right to your grade band and download learning standards by grade band. You also have access to some examples. There's some great examples there for all K through 12 curricular areas, as well as for all the standards. And some of the standards have multiple examples. And then there's the standards at a glance document. I'm just going to click on grade band, 2-3. What I love about these documents is that I can print out this sheet. It's just 2 pages and I can keep it by my computer, or I can download it onto my computer and have access to it as I'm looking at my curriculum and trying to purposely and authentically align these standards to activities that I'm doing with my learners. So right here, the first one is impacts of computing, and you'll see the sub-concepts are on the left, and then the standards are in this green area on the right. You will see that the standards are written with the grade band, the concept area, and the standard number, and there are only 7 standards for this concept area. So I'm going to talk about one of them and just kind of discuss how this might be integrated into your classroom. It's grade band 2-3 IC standard 3, and it's in the ethics sub-concept area. Discuss and explain how computing technology can be used in society and the world. One thing I really want to point out is that, yes, these are computer science and digital fluency learning standards. It doesn't always mean you need to be using technology in order to be fluent with these standards, in order for your students to have an understanding of these standards. Sometimes traditional activities are absolutely okay and will work perfect for your learners to understand these standards. So this one, standard 3, discuss and explain how computing technology can be used in society and the world. That could be a whole group conversation. It could be a table conversation. It could be a journal entry, written or typed. It could be an elbow partner discussion and then pulled back into the whole group. It's something that is easy to do and can be pulled into many conversations you have with your learners. I'm going to go back and click on a different grade band. I'm going to click on 7-8, and you'll see here again 7 standards. And I'm going to look at standard 4. So this again is under ethics. Identify and discuss issues related to the collection and use of public and private data. Again, this could be a conversation you have in your class. It could be something that you have when you're talking about using one of the databases that you use for research and what information that database is pulling from your private data. Talking about how students are providing information when they sign up for a particular app or when they sign up to purchase something. There's that public and private data, and having that conversation about what is important to keep private and what is okay to use publicly, and then how your information is collected by different companies and resources. And there's been, a big awareness level with the EdLaw 2D, maybe even having some basic conversations with your learners, explaining what private information is and personal identifiable information, what that means to learners and it means to teachers and school districts, and why it's important for us to make sure that we're protecting that information. I'm going to look at standard number 2, evaluate the impact of laws or regulations on the, let's go up to subconcept area society, and standard number 2, evaluate the impact of laws or regulations on the development and use of computing technologies and digital information. So, laws have certainly changed. Maybe even talking about copyright laws, how it used to be a lot different when we didn't have digital resources, video resources, and things like that. Have conversations with your learners, maybe create a presentation, maybe have some students talking about regulations and laws and how that impacts end users and companies. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we can integrate these standards into our learning experiences. Here are a few examples of some activities that will align to the standards. If we look at grade band K1, standard 1, identify and describe one or more patterns found in nature or designed, and examine the patterns to find similarities and make predictions. Now, off the top of my head, definitely could think about something that's an unplugged activity with patterns with numbers, with patterns with shapes, things like that. That's that thinking process that gets our learners thinking about patterns found in nature or designed. Again, it doesn't have to be technology based. So that's an unplugged activity. Or students could create a T-chart of things that they do that use technology and then compare that to how those tasks were accomplished before technology. Tasks might include looking up things online, map applications, or online games. So thinking about that, thinking about the patterns of what things you had to change when you started using technology, how did you accomplish that before, finding similarities and differences and making those predictions. So there's 2 great examples on how to help learners master that standard. And then we have grade band 2-3, standard number 2. Compare and explain rules related to computing technologies and digital information. So compare classroom playground rules with the internet computer rules on chart paper. So this is how I behave in the classroom or on the playground, and compare and contrast that to how you might interact on the internet or on the computer. And including reasoning why these rules were meant to keep them safe. Thinking about that stranger danger, right? Like that's meant to keep students safe. And this is how we might act on the playground and how we might act if we're at the grocery store. And then those rules are important to think about also when we're online and working on a computer and interacting on the internet. Grade band 4-6, standard number 4, identify public and private digital spaces. So students can explain what things posted to online accounts can be accessed by friends and strangers, when they share that data. So thinking about that and thinking about, again, almost that stranger danger idea. What is okay to share with the public? What is not okay? And what is considered a private digital space as opposed to a public digital space? It's really important that our learners begin to understand at a very young age, because technology is always changing and technology access is something that our learners are used to and expect, and we want to make sure that they are being safe. Grade band 7-8, standard number 6, assess the accessibility of a computing device or software application in terms of user needs. So students might notice that allowing a user to change font size and colors will not only make it an interface usable for people with low vision, but also benefits users in various situations, such as bright daylight or in a dark room. Also thinking about, I saw a great example of a project where students created an app and had to have certain accessibility features involved in that app. And it was a business class where they were creating a company that had an app. And then what type of accessibility features did that app need to make it accessible to all users? And thinking about some of the accessibility features that are built into some of the resources that we use in our classroom every day, Office 365 or Google, having that, text to speech, changing font size, and different features, read to me features that really can help a user. Then let's look at grade band 912 and its standard number 7, investigate the use of computer science in multiple fields. Well, think about how our world has changed, and we're in the fourth industrial revolution, and thinking about how different careers that you wouldn't think would use technology do use technology. And so a student could investigate fashion design and could conduct interviews to see how computer science intersects with that field. I always think it's really interesting when you take a job that you think might not even use technology, but a lot of their activities are aligned to these standards. Fashion design, that has certainly changed when it probably used to be just pencil and paper, and now it's going to more digital features and the color combinations and the pattern combinations and things like that. It's really interesting to see how that's changed and why you would need to have understanding of computer science. Take a moment and brainstorm how you could integrate the impacts of computing standards in your classroom. I'm not talking about all the standards. Think about a concept area that makes sense to be integrated into your curricular area. I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that, and we'll come back together. So now that you've done some brainstorming, what do you see as your biggest challenge? Why would it be hard to integrate these standards into your curricular area? And then think about, how do you overcome that? If you work within the Monroe-Wauboces region, feel free to reach out to me and I can help you with the integration. Or you can connect with an instructional technology specialist or instructional specialist within your district. If you're outside the Monroe-Wauboces region, you can connect with your BOCES, or again, connect with an instructional specialist or instructional technology specialist in your district. If you have any questions, please feel free to connect with me. I will include my contact information with this video. Thank you for spending time with me today. I appreciate you listening, and I hope that you learned at least a little bit about the impacts of computing, and it gets your gears moving and how you can integrate these standards into your curriculum.